many gods watching the players began to react violently, while some constellations were even amazed at the man's strength. At one point, the guy received a message that the twin deity began to show great interest in his personality. It seems Li Chang-sung was waiting for this moment. From his previous life he remembered that the twins' names were Castor and Pollux. He had an evil smile on his face in anticipation of their meeting, but he still didn't know which brother he was talking about. Excessive attention from the gods made itself felt. Within a moment, the guy felt incredible pressure, which could greatly suppress all his senses before he strengthened his body. It was a great demon. He reacted sharply to what happened, burning through the underworld with his eyes. The system reported that a great demon is trying to reach the player with its evil hands. Within a moment, the surface under his feet began to crack. The guy fell into a dark abyss, having no way to resist. Mephistopheles' acute reaction led to him deciding to take the player to his divine lands. Li Chang-sung did not expect such a turn of events. Amidst the darkness, he landed on the surface. He didn't understand what place he was in, so he began to activate his reconnaissance abilities one by one, but for some unknown reason they all instantly turned off before they provided any valuable information. At that moment, he realized that he was indeed in divine territory, but he still did not know the reason why Pale had pulled him into this place. The system reported that Pale's terrifying gaze was directed towards the player. A huge omnipotent eye appeared in front of him, after which the forced interference with his mind began. The unimaginable power of one of the deities was so strong that the power of the player's pure mind had difficulty coping with the pressure. In a low and scary voice, the demon asked who the player was. At that moment, Li Chang-sung couldn't control himself and began to lose control. The deity mysteriously uttered a phrase about the abyss that he sees in man. Within a moment, a bright flash appeared behind the player, and the system reported that the owl deity piercing the dim light had descended into the territory of the pale deity. The guy couldn't believe what was happening before his eyes. The goddess of just war, Minerva, came to his defense. Addressing the man, she stated that in divine territory there is no place for a mortal standing in the way of a hero. After these words, she snapped her fingers. Li Chang-sung flew to the side at high speed, breaking through the area. He quickly left the divine domain, but could still hear the conversation of the terrifying creatures. The pale constellation asked the goddess not to stand in her way, while Minerva replied that his actions were contrary to the divine pact, and the person who had fallen into his domain had nothing to do with what he was pursuing. Li Chang-sung returned to the dungeon again. He could not believe what happened in these few minutes. With an angry look, he said furiously that it was disgusting. Returning to the dungeon, he decided to go to the exhausted enemies and activated the Jigui vessel. He considered the recent incident a real shame, because he could easily have died if he had not completed the strengthening of his bones, because there was no way he could resist Mephistopheles. Despite improving his body many times over, Li Chang-sung admitted that he was still weak to fight the constellation. He needed to regain his former strength as a shadow god, but to win, he must be able to surpass it. And first, he was going to absorb everything in this dungeon. While in flight, his Viper Eye ability detected the target. A difficult battle led to the fact that one of the fighters came closer to victory. Looking at the battle, Li Chang-sung could predict how it would end. Young Eugene is a magician, but the Scarlet King of Murder is a martial artist, so such a battle is difficult for a girl. By the end of the dungeon there were 20 hours left. He couldn't let her die until she told him about San's 7 mysterious writings. Despite all her efforts, Jong Eugene, as expected, was inferior in the battle with the king. Lamashtu wondered why he couldn't think of a better tactic, then asked if she was indeed a blood relative of her follower. Head Haoff planned to quickly defeat the monster of this floor and destroy Haho's mask, but this was too difficult a task. Her enemy continued to anticipate her attacks. He reflected everything, while she, having lost an arm at the beginning of the battle, began to noticeably inferior in terms of strength. Looking at the Scarlet King, she thought that he looked like a player who was trying to defeat the dungeon boss. She was distracted, and within a moment the enemy was behind her. The Scarlet King, finding himself next to the enemy, thanked the girl for the entertaining fight. He tried to reassure her that, as a reward, he would make a new vessel out of her. Young Yujin realized that her battle was over. Within a moment, she flew away from the powerful blow of the boss of this floor. With great speed, her body flew into the rock. The exhausted girl could no longer move after such severe wounds. She tried to use Hellfire Song magic, but her power was greatly reduced. The sad, weeping spirit rose from her seat, watching with pity the fate of her faithful follower's daughter. The Scarlet King was one step away from ending this battle with a powerful sword slash, but at that moment Li Chansung intervened. The guy left his enemy, saying that this girl belongs to him. After these words, he launched a powerful blow to throw the enemy back. The genie was not going to stop there and rushed to the attack again. He noticed that the man had become significantly stronger compared to their last battle. Sighing with a sly grin, the cold-eyed guy replied that he had become much more than just stronger. A series of quick attacks made it clear that Li Chansung had begun to significantly outnumber him in battle. The opponents dispersed to safety, and the Scarlet King asked how he managed to improve his position so much. The guy replied that it would remain a mystery. Suddenly for the player, the Scarlet King genie assumed that the man had come from outside. Li Chansung was surprised that the boss of this floor knew the structure of the ghost cave. The genie replied that he had to endure the curse of that place, just like a person. The battle-hardened warrior said that even if Li Chansung went outside, he could not stay there for more than one day. He believed that no one would have managed as much as his opponent. With a determined look, he shouted that he must make his enemy a member of his family, no matter the cost. After this, the furious monster rushed to attack. The battle of two monsters led to the destruction of the rocks that were around their battlefield. The frightened ghosts did not know where to hide. They suffered from the consequences of the battle between two monsters. King Jin laughed loudly, saying that he could not even imagine that he would have so much fun in this ghost cave. At that moment, he remembered his past when he was human. He was known as Jin, the heir of the Frisia family. The battle with the man reminded him of the feelings he experienced in the battles for Arcadia. The exhausted king turned to his enemy and said that this was a very exciting fight. But he understood that he would not be able to give it his all, since he spent most of his energy fighting the witch. Looking at the enemy, the wounded and proud warrior asked what the man was going to do to entertain him this time. The guy decided not to play with the enemy and get down to business seriously, so he took out both of his legendary swords. A terrifying purple energy began to appear above him. This time he could demonstrate all his strength, since he was well rested before the battle with the Scarlet King. Swinging the fish gut sword, he activated the ability of the first claw of the Black Lord of the Mountain. His powerful attack was aimed at the wounded king. Unfortunately for him, he was unable to block such an incredible force that requires a huge amount of energy. The wounded warrior screamed in pain. At the same moment, Li Chang immediately used the second claw of the Black Mountain Lord. Looking back, Scarlet King Jin could only watch the unimaginable power. A huge tiger aura was directed towards him. It strengthened the attack of the Black Mountain Lord's ability. After a powerful flash, the battle was over. Near death, the king wondered what had happened. Realizing that there was no way out of this situation, he directly asked the enemy what terrifying force he used this time. Li Chansung respected this opponent, so he calmly replied that it was a tiger claw. Hearing his words, Jean Frisia began to laugh loudly, despite his defeat, which ruined his plans to return home. Using the power of the Lord of the Underworld, Li Chansung began to absorb his power, after which the system reported that he had received a huge amount of Biwi's properties. At one point, the system reported that he had now acquired a new ability, the power of Biwi. He had the opportunity to make the Scarlet King a member of his ability, similar to what his enemy planned to do with the defeated witch of the Hayoff clan. This new opportunity brought an evil smile to his face, as he realized that he would now be able to create a team from the strongest defeated opponents. Biwi is a mystical creature known for devouring the king's tiger scourge in the past. It has a vile character and sometimes tests the strength of its owner. But once the owner achieves the creature's favor, it begins to show unsurpassed devotion. Li Chang-sung knew that he would need the organization's assistance if he wanted to rise through the hierarchy like the 12 zodiacs, or the ruler of the abyss. If the organization grows and its members include gods and constellations, then it will become a full-fledged society. He believed that the absorbed properties of the BV had reached a critical point, which is why he became incorporeal. He had to think about how to get out of this situation. He had to make sure that he had no other motives and then start giving him some of his experience points. But this cannot be decided with a snap of his fingers. He doesn't increase his level so quickly, and all because he can't decide on a deity. In addition, he has Baekjayaval. By remembering failures from the past, he could look at this situation from the perspective of experience. He had lost those closest to him in countless battles before. Li Chang-sung was experienced enough to know where he could go on his own. There was nothing to think about. He might not have been able to cope without a team. Using force, he declared that he was choosing the Scarlet King of Murders as his Biwi. After these words, the ability restored the true appearance of the city warrior. Genie Frisuus said he never thought he would awaken like this. He asked the guy if he was really trying to make him a member of his family. Looking at the true appearance of the representative of the big family, Li Chang-sung recognized his strength and asked if he could count on his support. With a cold look, the genie replied that there was no rule against it. After all, this is a ghost cave where the winner takes all. After these words, he added that the recognition of a person as his master will remain with him. Li Chang-sung noticed that most likely Jin did not intend to do this. Perhaps he wanted to rest, but Li Chang could not allow him such luxury. While next to him, he suddenly told his subordinate that he would let him go. After this, the guy suggested that the genie really wanted to return home. The surprised man asked the player what he was hinting at. Li Chang-sung replied that he would not say meaningless things like that. He would like to see him as a devoted servant. In return, he simply asked him to follow him. He admitted that he could not promise that he would take the guy home right now, but he assured that sooner or later they would visit Arcadia. After these words, he swore with his flame with a smile on his face. Sighing with tension, the man wondered why he would trust a man with whom he had recently fought to the death. Li Chang-sung replied in a friendly manner that if he just couldn't trust him, then let him have hope in his heart, which would make him less irritated by this situation. In response, Jin held his head and began to laugh, saying that Li Chang-sung is a weirdo who is hard to meet. After looking around, he said that leaving this place in any case would be better than remaining in captivity for the rest of his life. Addressing the player, he asked him to be on his guard, warning him that he was not the submissive type, because he hated being controlled. With an adventurous smile, the determined Li Chang-sung agreed with him. The conversation between the recent enemies took on a friendly character, and the genie admitted that the more he gets to know the player, the stranger he seems to him, which is precisely why he considered this person so interesting. After this confession, he knelt before his new master and asked to give him a new name so that under it he could serve him. Li Chang-sung replied that his name would be Jean Frisius. The guy was surprised by the memory of his master. When they first met, he mentioned that he was Jean, heir to the illustrious scion of the powerful Frisius family. Rising to his feet, the man admitted that he had met a very strange gentleman. The system reported that the name of the Biwi is Jean Frisius, and from now on he will be his sword and protection. After this, he asked his master what his first order would be. At the same moment, Li Chang gave him his spear. It was clear from his look what the conversation would be about. Behind them there was a huge number of ghosts. The guy ordered his faithful subordinate to destroy them. Just a moment ago they were personal subordinates, and now he will have to destroy them with his own hands. Jean admitted that Li Chan is even more interesting than he originally thought. Looking at the number of opponents, he replied that this was enough to check his condition. At the moment, Jean Frisia had the first level and he needed to reach the 10th level in order to receive an increased rank. Taking a look at what happened to His Majesty, the ghost began to shake in fear. Within a moment, this monster jumped off the slope and approached the army that had previously been under its command. He was looking forward to fighting in the guise that belonged to him in his best times. When unleashing his great family's coarse spear art, he spared no one. The ghosts ran away in fear. They did not understand why their king went crazy after his resurrection. Li Chan-sung finished with this part of his work, and it was time for dessert. He looked towards the exhausted leader of the Hayoff clan. It's time to find out about the 7 mysterious manuscripts of San. Noticing his behavior, Lamashtu began to look at the player with hostility, after which she began to curse him altogether. She began to threaten him, and the system continued to send ridiculous messages that interfered with his work. To rectify the situation, he decided to turn to Harold. There was no answer, but Li Chang didn't intend to wait long. Turning to the dungeon administrator who was in charge of surveillance, he stated that if he did not show up, then he would refuse to protect him. After these words, a rift opened. The rabbit was not yet visible, but his words were heard that the dungeon leader was prohibited from directly interfering in the process of clearing the dungeon. An excited rabbit tried to crawl through a small crack. He said that his elders continued to find fault with him because of the incident in the cave near the capital of Korea. He had noticeably transformed since their last meeting. Harold's excuse was that due to the incredible amount of stress he had begun to overeat and gain weight. It was difficult to tell whether he was lying or not, but seeing his body in such a state, the deities began to laugh at him. When the rabbit fully emerged, Li Chan told him that he would like to block messages from a certain deity. The rabbit was simply in shock. He could not believe that a pathetic mortal would want to do this with messages from a deity. The player explained to the administrator that he did not want to see them, and if necessary, he could pay with part of his achievement points. The guy's words turned out to be a continuation of an interesting spectacle, and the deities who were watching the player continued to choke with laughter. Li Chang-sung didn't want to waste time making excuses for the administrator, so he asked him to hurry up. The excited Harold could not believe that the impudent guy was really going to do this to the deity. He did not understand who he was trying to impress with such impudent behavior. He thought that he could not simply answer that this was against the rules. His situation was difficult, because if this incident was revealed during the inspection, then he would be punished even more. At the same time, Mephistopheles joined them. The system reported that he was looking down on the player and the administrator. The rabbit couldn't believe that the great demon was still showing such an unhealthy interest in this guy. Li Chang-sung couldn't understand what the Abyss Lord was planning this time. Within a moment, the system reported that Lamashtu raised her head high at the will of absolute evil. Mephistopheles continued to watch this indifferently. The incredible pressure of such a respected lord of the abyss forced Lamashtu to maintain his power and panic. The system reported that the great demon reached out to follow the gaze. Terrifying clouds appeared in the sky above the player and administrator, and thunder erupted. Pabelsag was shocked by what she saw. During these frightening events, the snake entwining the world only wisely remained silent. The appearance of the great demon silenced Kaja as well. Looking into the heavens, the player and administrator realized that it was all over. The sky returned to its previous form. The system reported that Mephistopheles shook his hand slightly and began to look down again. He addressed the player, saying that he had gotten rid of the parasite, so Li Chan could now continue with his business. The conflict was ended by the intervention of a great demon. When it was all over, Harold said with relief that as soon as the player called for his help, his calmness immediately disappeared. It was all over, so he asked permission to say goodbye. Within a moment, the fat rabbit returned to his hole. Minerva took a deep breath. while the system reported that one of the twins' faces became very interested in what was happening. Jean Fresius turned to his master, saying that he was just a demon. Freed from Lamashtu's excessive attention, Li Chan-sung was able to return to his previous assignment. Looking at the girl, the guy realized that she was starting to lose her mind. He understood that there was no point in torturing her for information. Having finished the job, he thought that he managed to take a lot out of this stay inside the dungeon. The girl, without any resistance, told him where the fifth of San's 7 secret scriptures was hidden. He couldn't believe that the White Tiger clan wanted to miss such an opportunity. If it weren't for him, their plan would have come true and they would have lost such a precise lead forever. Li Chang-sung learned from the system that Jean had cleared the 2nd floor. Even though he raised them, he was surprised that they turned out to be such pathetic weaklings in battle. At that moment, he realized that it was no wonder why he could not take the 3rd floor with them. In response to these words, Li Chan praised him for his efforts, saying that he completed it faster than he expected. Jean asked his master to come to him because he wanted to show him something really interesting. His last job was to extort the soul of the leader of the Hayoth clan. He managed to gain her power by using the purifying flame. He burned this power and increased the level of his skill. After that, the guy went to meet his ward. The Jivi vessel continued to develop and now the movement was even faster. He did not specify the meeting place, so he headed to the palace of the Scarlet King. Jean Fresius was on the surface and shouted to him to head in his direction. He waited a long time for his master to return and managed to prepare something interesting. A family member stated that the gentleman shared with him a very useful ability. In order not to be verbose, he decided to demonstrate what he was talking about. Reaching out to the pacifiers, he gave them the order to wake up. After these words, the ability to revive ghosts was activated. Li Chang-sung didn't understand what was happening. Jean Fresius himself was surprised. He admitted that he thought something similar could work. This ability worked the same way as when he was the Scarlet King's slayer. The ghosts of this cave are the fools who were previously observed by the starlight. People who came here became one of the ghosts, losing their essence. He explained that the effectiveness of this ability is significantly lower compared to when he was king, as there is a limit to how much essence he can absorb. Demonstrating this, he said that he could resurrect the dead as puppets. But when he tried to make them move, the ghosts lost their magical power and ceased to exist. They were destroyed even before they took their first steps. To revive one fighter, he had to absorb the energy of hundreds of ghosts. But this way he was able to revive at least a few warriors. Among them, Pumpkin was different. Like the others, he is a natural enemy of tigers. He did not receive damage from sharp blades such as spears, swords, and claws. The next weirdo was a warrior called Bamboo Cow. He is thick-headed like a cow, but has the same amount of strength. The last was the Bow. It had incredible flexibility, which raises doubts about whether it has bones. The squad looked promising. In addition, the gods encouraged the guy, saying that they were all now rightfully members of his family. The situation did not seem serious, so Li Chan-sung directly asked his comrade whether these fighters would be of any use. Jean was sure that this ability made sense, and then offered to look at their actions. Addressing the puppets, he ordered them to wake up, saying that they were going to the 3rd floor. Jean also advised them to try their best while the master is looking at them, because if they turn out to be useless, then their existence will be in question. It was something like training. The monsters unanimously agreed with the order. After these words, Jean Fresius suggested that the gentlemen go to clear the next floor. 2 incredible fighters and their mind-blowing strike force of hellish creatures set out to attack. Their appearance turned out to be quite loud. The conquest of the various departments of the 3rd floor occurred much faster than before. Their low-level guards successfully planted a flag at the end point of Section 9. Li Chang-sung received points, but as it turned out, there were not so many of them, even though they captured all the camps. Still, Making the Scarlet King a member of your family was an excellent decision, because together the cleanup went much faster. In front of them was a palace in which the Azure King's Slayer was located. Jean said that technically this place can be considered a real gate to the third floor. Now there are no low-level ghouls there, but it is full of scarlet ghosts, so it will be more difficult to meet the boss. The family member managed to oppress the enemy forces. This was an obvious outcome, such is the difference in their abilities. Moreover, he believed that his squad also deserved praise. It was much easier to fight together than alone. There were 4 hours left before the end of the dungeon. The player thought that if his new ward is really a member of the Frisia family that he knows, then this luck can be considered a huge jackpot, because divine blood flows in the veins of the Frisia family from Arcadia. They are outstanding martial artists, swordsmen and strategists, which is why an entire nation fears their strength. Li Chang believed that Jean would be the ideal heir, so it seemed strange how he ended up in the ghost cave. He assumed that this guy might have touched the mysterious sculpture, hoping to proclaim victory over the other heirs. Remembering that sooner or later he would have to face the apostle of the deity Haju, he thought that it would not be easy for him to repel the attacks of the spirit of Moon Song soldiers. But as long as Jean was with him, there was nothing to worry about. Returning to the conversation with his ward, the guy confirmed his words that the squad was quite good, after which he took out an eternal ice crystal and asked him to finish all the preparations. Seeing this object, the man was surprised, which seemed strange to the player, because there are no such ghosts in the cave. Jean replied that most likely Li Chang had not heard that his Frisian family was quite famous in Arcadia, so he saw all the existing treasures. Despite a life rich in experience, he admitted that this was the first time he had seen such an incredible crystal. He felt divine power emanating from him. Such an item would be an unaffordable luxury for an ordinary person. Extending the crystal to his comrade, he asked him to take it, since he was sure that Jean knew how to handle it. This proposal was a sudden generosity that was hard to take seriously from a guy you had recently met. Jean began to laugh loudly, saying that he had never met such a funny gentleman. He could not believe that Li Chang really wanted to leave the fish in the paws of the cat. Li Chang-sung did not mind his ward considering him a real man. He was ready to give him even a reinforced bone, but this is impossible, since it requires the strength of a jigui. He was confident that the Frisian family's hereditary methods were effective enough to handle this power. Grabbing the ice crystal, Jean recalled his words that it would be difficult for him to recognize anyone as his master, and this title would mean nothing to him. He couldn't believe that despite this, Li Chang gave him such an expensive item. Li Chang-sung replied that he does not require him to be a devoted member of his family. The man was surprised that even despite this, he would be given this item. Jean called it surprising how stupid the player is, and then decided to use a rare item. A member of the player's family has swallowed an eternal ice crystal. He was granted cold element magic after the cold air settled in his body. The crystal was completely absorbed and Jean even acquired a new body shape. The system reported that family member Jean Frisius created a new blizzard ability and evolved into an ice dead. With a sly smile on his face, he said that he felt much fresher now. He wanted to try out another ability the crystal had given him. It was permafrost. A powerful ice shot was aimed at the third-floor palace, from which the cries of wounded ghosts began to emanate. He believed that such a sudden attack must have made the Azure King's Slayer very frightened. Capturing this palace was not much of a problem, and after half an hour they were right in front of the floor boss. Looking at the long, familiar boss of the second floor, the local king could not believe that his former competitor had become a man's faithful dog. He agreed with his assumption, after which he said that he most likely would not be able to get any valuable answers from the boss of the second floor, which is why it was time for them to say goodbye. The frightened Azure King assassin extended his hand forward and began to beg in hysterics to spare him. He believed that he would help their squad in the future. But after a moment, Jean finished the matter. He believed that this liar could only say some nonsense. like taking over the next floors together. Li Chang's son just watched this calmly. He constantly received messages that he had been awarded points for the battle. Still, this floor was not completely cleared, because there were 3 more bosses on it. Jean Frisius was not going to stop there, so he continued to clear the dungeon. At that moment, his master understood that there was no point in rushing. The time for clearing was over. The system reported that this time he had been assigned an expert level result. This was different from the previous day's result. Due to the fact that the team did most of the work, the reward was a little worse. Within a moment, he returned to reality, where Baek Jevel was trying to bring him to consciousness. Li Chang-sung was surprised how suddenly he returned to the battle inside the Snow Palace. A huge audience gathered in front of him. These were fighters of the Hayoff clan. They were trying to find out from the stranger what he had done to the head of their clan. Even though Li Chang-sung showed them his true colors, there was no longer any danger. Without responding to the enemies, the player called his new family member and asked him to get rid of the annoying insects. Jean replied that he would gladly carry out this order. After some time, the Winter Palace was completely captured. Li Chang-sung thanked his comrade for a good job and said that he needed to look somewhere, so he would go first. After these words, the player returned to the guest house of the Winter Palace. He still wanted to take away what was lying idle. It was about the body of the king of the snowmen. He was seriously wounded at his own request, and after some time, he died the way he wished. The old man looked ugly, but despite this, he had a very high level during his life. Li Chang-sung activated his soul extortion power and used the purification flame to burn the Frost King's body. Looking at this poor fellow for the last time, the guy thought that this king reminded him of himself at the moment when he fell in Arcadia. Addressing the old man who had disappeared from this world, he again repeated his words that he was not a fake. When the body evaporated, he noticed that there was some kind of letter underneath it. Meanwhile, fierce battle continued on the battlefield. The great Winter General and Agent Cha Yun continued to fight each other using their strongest abilities. Bigfoot's powerful attacks could not hit her, as the agent had incredible speed. After another unsuccessful attack, they found time to talk. Looking at the girl, the General of Winter admitted that she was strong, because usually he ignores all uninvited guests, since most of them are weak, but this was a completely different case and he recognized the strength of the association agent. After that, he inquired about her rank outside the dungeon and guessed that she was the king of the people. Hearing his words, she was shocked that, being a monster, the great Winter General could differentiate between the underground and the rest of the world. Hatred for the enemy who injured her colleague haunted her, and so she continued to attack. A powerful explosion obscured her enemy from view. Looking down at the girl, he declared that even with such amazing power, she was still not the king of the human race. After that, he admitted that he could not understand people. Climbing onto the flying monster, he shouted that anyone who is not a king has no right to fight it. With great malice in his eyes, the great General of Winter declared that he simply wanted to kill the king of men for killing his own. He was ready to destroy those inside their dungeon in order to finally meet the true enemy king. After his words, full of terrifying anger, the system announced the creation of a sudden task called the King's Killer. From that moment the players had to stop all the snowmen, including the great general, because otherwise they would bring misfortune to reality. The girl was shocked that now their battle would go beyond the boundaries of the dungeon. If they fail in this task, then a new rift will appear on their planet, through which the snowmen will penetrate into their cities. Approaching the girl, Mr. Wu told the agent that they must defeat this monster at any cost. After learning the terms of the task, Seo Yunquan was looking forward to a fierce battle, as he believed that he was the strongest among the people in this dungeon. Within a moment, one of the clan fighters, not paying attention to the words of the commander of the second detachment, declared that it was time to get rid of the general. He could not believe that the allied forces had still not dealt with the mid-level boss. Seo Yunquan couldn't stand their impudence, so he shouted that this monster belonged to him. In response, the two guys started laughing at his words, saying that he was injured and not suitable for such a responsible task. Within a moment, all three suddenly rose into the air. This was the effect of Agent Cha Yun's ability. She turned to the children and said that she would not be able to hold the spell for long, but would try to support them with magical blows so that they could fight the monster more safely. After that, all three members of the White Tiger clan simultaneously attacked the enemy. Wu Yunun couldn't stand by and just watch. He informed his colleagues that he would attack from the ground, after which he used the 10,000 songs technique. The Sword Master's powerful blow destroyed all the snow monsters in its radius. But this was not enough, because there was no end to the enemies. The concerned man thought about how he could protect his less powerful comrades. But at the same moment, the enemy attacked him and he realized that he had no time to be distracted. He did not have time to dodge and thought about whether he could block this sudden attack. At the same moment, his niece appeared nearby, her Storm God blade greatly enhanced by the acceleration of her Storm Run ability. Moving at great speed, the girl without much difficulty got rid of the snow monster that had gotten into her uncle's back. Her appearance was what helped save the head of one of the major organizations from inevitable injury. Having gotten rid of the enemy, the girl shouted to her uncle that he should pull himself together, because he is responsible for all the members of his clan of swordsmen. The man was confused and then said that Haiban is much better than him. As it turned out, his father gave his granddaughter 2 blades and artifacts worth more than 100 billion won. Watching her actions, Pabel Sag became interested in the hunting skills of this humble player. The dragon's daughter was interested in helping her learn hunting skills, after which she warned that such an opportunity might not arise again. The girl did not know who she was dealing with. She believed that it was worth asking her savior about this. It was natural that she interested the goddess of the hunt. Being in the first dungeon in her life, the girl absorbed everything she saw. She wanted to follow in Li Chang's footsteps. For her, he was not just a savior, but also a mentor. Pabel Sag watched her incredible abilities with her mouth open. Accelerating her every movement, the air was not an obstacle for her, and she could fight not only with the snowmen on the ground, but also with those who flew on winged monsters. The girl could not help but notice the attention from the deity. Pabel Sag watched with pleasure every move of the talented player. Dungeon battles were something Haiban still wasn't ready for. She would like to enjoy a normal life with her friends longer, but her goal was beyond their understanding of the world. The girl's lightning ability hampered the movements of all her enemies within its radius. The system reported that due to the fact that the player Wu Habin became active, the snow pterodactyls began to lose their ability to fly and fall to the ground. Her actions caused a lot of problems for the army of snowmen, so the great general of the King of Frost drew attention to the girl's actions and ordered his charges to deal with her. Within a moment, a huge number of air warriors from the snow dungeon headed towards her. It was a real aerial bombardment. They used an item called an Agniyon as an explosive. A magician from Li Chan Sung's squad came to her defense. Player Shin Jumjayo activated the Ouroboros formula ability and created a temporary trap that protected them from the explosions. After this, he turned to his sister for help. Yunseo replied that she would take care of his problem. The girl activated the Tower Strike ability, causing her shield to begin to increase in size. But at one point she stopped because her magical energy simply ran out. Junj began to blame her for the irrational use of her strength. In response, Yunseo began to make excuses by saying that she simply ate poorly and fought too much. Watching their efforts for the sake of justice, Minerva could not stand aside and expressed admiration for their spirit. She blessed the girl to fight her enemies, after which she restored her strength and energy. She immediately felt a surge of strength. Thanking the goddess for her gifts, the girl activated the Jida effect. Thanks to this, she was again able to increase her shield and use it to its full strength. Using the tower attack, the girl began to run towards the enemies. Her weapon was so huge that even snow pterodactyls were within its range. Watching their actions, Wu Hebin began to feel the difference in their battle experience. Addressing the girl, Jumj asked her not to waste the opportunity. After these words, Hebin stopped being distracted by her thoughts and dealt a crushing lightning strike to her enemies. The massive destruction of air units caused the great general of winter to become angry towards his incompetent charges. At the same moment, Song Yun-kwan was already approaching him to strike him unexpectedly. But the dungeon boss was ready for this. He even managed to shout that anyone who is not a king has no right to fight him. He decided to avoid the intrusive flying warriors of the White Tiger clan and went to the one who was really causing the most trouble. A magician from Li Chan's squad, Shinjumj saw that the strongest of the enemies was approaching him. At the same moment, he began to use the Viper Curse, and the system reported that the great general of King Frost and his snow pterodactyl were under the effect of the Chaos Curse. But with one swing of his sword, an experienced dungeon boss could easily cancel any negative effect placed on him. Within a moment, the general delivered a strong blow, from which the magician could not resist. His next target was Wu Weibin, who was so infuriating with his ability. The new dungeon boss struck her hard with his sword. The girl lacked experience and strength. The difference in their level did not allow her to completely block such an unexpected attack. From a powerful blow, she flew into the nearest rock. Because of the last attack, she had lost too much stamina and could no longer continue fighting while the enemy was right in front of her. Looking into her eyes, the terrifying monster shouted that no one dare stand in his way except kings. But the girl did not pay attention to his furious screams. She only thought about whether she could do at least something important, like her mentor. She just wanted to save the people who came with her to this dungeon. For her, that would be more than enough. Within a moment, a fiery flash appeared in the sky. The system reported that Li Chang-sung had appeared on the battlefield. The girl could not believe that her mentor came to her aid at the most difficult moment of the battle. Association agent Cha Yun also sensed his appearance. Looking at the one who prevented him from finishing off the problem man, the great general of winter asked who he was. In response, the guy asked if he had any assumptions. With incredible rage, the snowman shouted that this was the same bastard who dared to kill their king of frost. The words of the dungeon boss spread throughout the entire battlefield. The fighters who heard this opened their mouths in surprise. They could not believe that the talented recruit continued to demonstrate incredible skill. Filled with rage, the general of winter asked if the player was the king of men. Li Chang-sung didn't understand what they were talking about, so the general shouted that if he killed their king, then he must destroy the king of people. The monster believed that the death of his master was not meaningless if he fell at the hands of the strongest of men. He tried to the end to find out whether the player was a king or not. Glancing arrogantly at Bigfoot, Li Chang-sun ironically replied that their race had long outgrown the monarchy, and they did not use such outdated concepts. Hearing this, the Winter General replied that in that case, Li Chang was no different from other people, after which he attacked him using the Tundra ability. Li Chang-sun was ready to fight. He took out his legendary blade and activated the Wild Tiger status, causing chaotic strikes to burst out. A furious battle between the strongest fighters in the dungeon has begun.